At the company's annual charity gala, my daughter-in-law, Serena, publicly dismissed me, the co-founder, as unnecessary baggage. Weeks later, scrubbing toilets in the executive suite I helped build, I simply smiled. She made a grave mistake underestimating the woman who laid every brick. I'm excited to share my story with you. Please like, share, and let me know where you're listening from. The harsh scent of industrial cleaner stung Eleanor Vance's nostrils, a stark contrast to the subtle, expensive perfumes she used to favor. Her hands, once accustomed to signing contracts and clasping her husband Arthur's during strategic meetings, now gripped a stiff bristled brush, scrubbing porcelain in the executive bathroom of Richardson Industries. 6 months. Krechter, and the $5. Industries. Krechter. 6 agonizing months since Arthur's sudden heart attack had ripped him from her life. And with him, her place at the helm of the empire they had painstakingly built. Now, she was the invisible co-founder, relegated to polishing fixtures that once gleamed under her watchful eye. A sharp, imperious voice cut through the hum of the ventilation fan. "Eleanor, are you still in here? Really? You're slower than a snail these days. Some things never change, I suppose." Eleanor straightened, her back aching, as Serena, her daughter-in-law, swept into the immaculate bathroom. Serena, sleek in a tailored power suit, a stark visual representation of her new authority, surveyed the room with a critical eye, as if Eleanor's presence itself was a smudge on the pristine surface. Her gaze lingered on Eleanor's faded uniform, a uniform Serena herself had insisted upon. "Mr. Davies from the Henderson Group will be here any minute," Serena announced, her tone dripping with disdain. "I need this place to look impeccable. And more importantly, I need you out of sight. We're discussing upgraded service standards, Eleanor, and frankly, you're just..." She emphasized the last words with a pointed glance, as if Eleanor were a discarded relic, not the architect of the very foundations Serena now stood upon. Eleanor bit back a retort. Unnecessary baggage. That was Serena's favorite label for her these days. It had been hurled at her countless times since Arthur's passing, each time twisting the knife a little deeper into the wound of her grief. She had gone from majority shareholder, a woman whose name had been synonymous with Richardson Industries for 4 decades, to a cleaning lady, a temporary arrangement. Serena had assured her, after Arthur's sudden death from a heart attack had left Eleanor reeling. A temporary arrangement that felt frighteningly permanent. Arthur and Eleanor had built Richardson Industries from a humble garage operation into a formidable enterprise. 40 years of blood, sweat, and shared dreams. Every brick, every patent, every successful negotiation was a testament to their partnership. She had been his sounding board, his strategic partner, his unwavering support. They had been an unstoppable force, but then Arthur was gone, and within weeks, Serena, Leo's wife, had moved with ruthless efficiency to seize control. Eleanor remembered the early days after Arthur's funeral, a blur of condolences and legal jargon. Serena, ostensibly offering comfort, had subtly begun to chip away at Eleanor's authority, isolating her from key decisions. Eleanor's attempts to stay involved, to offer her experience and insight, were met with condescension. "Mother, dear, we appreciate your concern," Serena would say, her voice syrupy sweet. "But things have changed. Modern business requires modern thinking." Even Leo, her own son, had begun to echo Serena's dismissals, his eyes clouded with what Eleanor suspected was a mix of grief, ambition, and a troubling passivity. The ultimate betrayal came in the form of an intervention. Leo and Serena, sitting across from her in Arthur's old office, the very room where she and Arthur had forged their dreams, they spoke in hushed, concerned tones, citing her drifting since Arthur's death, her understandable emotional vulnerability. They suggested she needed something more manageable, something less stressful than the executive responsibilities of a multi-million-dollar corporation. That was when the cleaning position was offered, framed as a way for her to stay connected to the company family without the burden of high-level decisions. A cruel joke. Eleanor realized now, it was a demotion designed to humiliate, to erase her. As Serena finished her inspection, adjusting a towel that was already perfectly folded, Eleanor caught a glimpse of the new 8x10 photograph on the wall in the outer office, visible through the open door. It depicted Serena, resplendent and beaming, shaking hands with the mayor. Beneath it, a gleaming brass plaque proclaimed, Serena Richardson, CEO and President. Her name, Serena's name, etched into the very fabric of the company she and Arthur had founded, with no mention of their legacy. Just make sure you're gone by the time Mr. Davies arrives, Serena reiterated, her voice sharp, before exiting, leaving a lingering trail of expensive perfume that seemed to mock Eleanor's current predicament. Eleanor continued to wipe down the counter, her movements precise, methodical. The humiliation was a raw, throbbing ache in her chest. For months, she had floated through a haze of grief and disbelief, allowing Serena's insidious takeover to unfold. She had been too tired, too heartbroken, to fight. Eleanor? A soft voice startled her. Brenda, from accounting, poked her head into the bathroom, her eyes filled with a familiar, quiet sympathy. Brenda had been with the company almost as long as Arthur and Eleanor. She knew. She understood. "Are you all right, dear?" Brenda whispered, her gaze lingering on Eleanor's hands, then flicking towards the open office door, clearly fearing Serena's return. "That's Serena. She's something else, isn't she?" Eleanor simply nodded, a tight smile on her lips. But Brenda's simple act of kindness, her unspoken acknowledgement of the injustice, was a small spark in the suffocating darkness. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt seen, not as a ghost of the past, not as unnecessary baggage, but as Eleanor Vance, a woman with a lifetime of experience, a fierce intellect, and a formidable will. The spark ignited something within her, a quiet, simmering resolve. Serena had made a grave error. She had confused grief with weakness, humility with powerlessness. Eleanor might be scrubbing toilets now, but she was not broken. She was observing. She was learning. And she was remembering every slight, every cruel word, every stolen legacy. Serena Richardson had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The dull metallic key, cool against her palm, felt heavier than any burden Eleanor had carried in months. It was Arthur's key, the one he had pressed into her hand just 2 weeks before his death. His eyes serious, almost solemn. "If anything ever happens to me, Elle," he'd said, his voice unusually quiet. "If things go sideways with the business, remember the insurance policy. You'll know what to do." She hadn't understood then, had simply nodded, preoccupied with his unusual gravity. Now, as the memory resurfaced with painful clarity, the key felt like a beacon, a sliver of hope in the suffocating darkness. That evening, after discarding her cleaning uniform and slipping into a sensible navy dress, Eleanor drove to First National Bank. This wasn't just any bank. It was their bank, the place where she and Arthur, fresh-faced and brimming with ambition, had secured their very first loan, a modest sum that felt like a fortune at the time, to launch Richardson Industries. The building itself held decades of their shared history, the silent witness to their triumphs and struggles. As she stepped through the familiar revolving doors, the scent of polished wood and old paper brought a wave of bittersweet nostalgia. Behind the counter, Miss Olson, the branch manager, a woman whose tenure at the bank stretched almost as long as Eleanor's marriage, looked up, her expression shifting from professional politeness to genuine surprise and concern. "Eleanor? My goodness, it's been a while. How are you, dear? We were all so terribly sorry to hear about Arthur." Miss Olson's voice was warm, a stark contrast to the icy indifference Eleanor had grown accustomed to from Serena and Leo. The words, simple as they were, made Eleanor's throat tighten. "Thank you, Miss Olson. I'm getting there," Eleanor managed, offering a weak smile. "I need to access Arthur's private safety deposit box, number 247. Miss Olson's eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course. Let me just get you set up." She led Eleanor to a private consultation room, the hushed atmosphere, a welcome respite from the public eye. Eleanor signed the necessary forms, her hand steady despite the tremor in her heart. This box, Arthur had explained, was for her eyes only. He had given her sole access, a detail that now struck her as profoundly significant. He had planned, he had known, Moments later, Miss Olson returned, carrying the long, heavy metal box. The click of the lock, the gentle slide of the drawer, felt like the turning of a key in Eleanor's own destiny. She thanked Miss Olson, who offered a sympathetic nod before discreetly excusing herself, leaving Eleanor alone with her past, and potentially, her future. Inside the box, nestled amongst what she expected to be old family heirlooms, or perhaps some outdated bonds, was a thick, manila envelope. Her name, Eleanor, was written on it in Arthur's elegant, familiar script. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The envelope contained several items: a stack of impeccably organized legal papers, a series of bank statements from an unfamiliar account, and finally, a folded letter, also in Arthur's hand. She picked up the letter first, her eyes devouring his familiar loops and flourishes. "My dearest Elle," it began, immediately bringing a fresh sting of tears to her eyes. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you, and things, as I feared, may have taken a turn for the worse at Richardson Industries. I hope I am wrong, but I know Serena. Her ambition, while impressive, can also be ruthless. I've seen the way she looks at our company, at your share. I worried for you, my love. Should anything happen to me." Eleanor swallowed hard, her vision blurring. Arthur, always so perceptive, so protective. The letter continued, explaining how, 5 years ago, he had quietly established a holding company he named VH Enterprises, a nod to their childhood nicknames, Victory and Hope. Under this entity, he had registered 15% of Richardson Industries stock. "These shares," Arthur wrote, "are yours, Elle. They were always intended to be yours. I just wanted to ensure they couldn't be easily taken or diluted without your knowledge. They are your insurance policy." Eleanor's mind raced, doing the quick calculations. Her existing 25% ownership, combined with this newly revealed 15% from VH Enterprises, meant she now held a staggering 40% of Richardson Industries. A controlling interest. She was not merely a shareholder. She was the majority shareholder. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind from her lungs, yet simultaneously filling them with a renewed sense of purpose. Arthur's letter guided her further. "To execute the transfer of these shares into your name, you'll need to contact Attorney Miller at Morrison & Associates. He is fully aware of VH Enterprises and its purpose. He has all the necessary documentation. Use this wisely, my love, not for revenge, but for justice, for everything we built, for our legacy, and for yourself." As she absorbed Arthur's words, she flipped through the attached bank statements. They belonged to the VH Enterprises account. Her eyes widened. The account held substantial dividend payments from the last 5 years, payments she had never known existed, never knew she was earning. The sheer accumulation of wealth, sitting quietly, patiently, waiting for her, was astounding. It wasn't just the shares, it was financial independence, power, and a clear path forward, all carefully laid out by Arthur. The broken widow, the unnecessary baggage, the scrubbing lady. All those identities shattered into dust. Eleanor Vance was no longer a victim of circumstance, no longer adrift in a sea of grief and humiliation. She was a woman re-empowered, fortified by her husband's foresight and love. She was a majority shareholder of Richardson Industries, and a formidable force was stirring within her, ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The game, she realized, had just changed entirely. Eleanor returned to Richardson Industries the next morning, the key to Arthur's secret in her pocket, feeling less like a burden and more like a hidden weapon. Her sensible navy dress was replaced by the familiar gray cleaning uniform, blending her seamlessly into the background, just as Serena intended. But today, Eleanor wore it not as a uniform of humiliation, but as a cloak of invisibility. Her cleaning cart, laden with sprays and cloths, was no longer just a tool for sanitation. It was her mobile surveillance equipment, allowing her to patrol the executive floor, listening and observing, unseen and unheard. She pushed her cart quietly past Serena's open office door. Inside, Serena's voice, smooth and practiced, drifted out. She was engaged in an animated conversation with Mr. Davies from the Henderson Group. his back to Eleanor as he leaned forward, captivated. Serena's smile was dazzling, her gestures expansive. "Of course, Mr. Davies," she purred. "My vision for Richardson Industries is one of radical innovation. We're talking about streamlining operations, eliminating redundancies, a truly agile approach." Eleanor paused, ostensibly polishing a framed award on the wall. Eliminating redundancies. The phrase echoed in her mind. Serena hadn't just called Eleanor unnecessary baggage directly. She was now framing her entire corporate strategy around the concept. A strategy that clearly positioned Eleanor as one of those redundancies. The icy knot in Eleanor's stomach tightened, but beneath it, a new fire sparked. Serena had no idea who she was truly dealing with. Eleanor moved on, her squeaky cartwheels a rhythmic counterpoint to the hushed professionalism of the executive suite. She positioned herself near the large, glass-walled executive conference room. Chloe, Serena's meticulously organized assistant, was inside, fussing over water glasses and arrangement of pastries for the upcoming meeting. Eleanor entered, a silent ghost, and began to dust the impressive mahogany table, her movements precise, almost imperceptible. Chloe barely registered her presence, focused entirely on her task. When the meeting began, Eleanor retreated to a corner, ostensibly polishing a seldom-used credenza, but her ears and eyes were wide open. Serena, now at the head of the long table, was delivering a polished presentation, a slick digital slideshow projected onto the large screen. The company's 40-year history flashed by, reimagined as Serena's personal success story. Arthur, the visionary founder, and Eleanor, his co-pilot, were barely footnotes, their contributions reduced to vague mentions of foundational work before Serena's dynamic leadership. Eleanor felt a pang of betrayal, but it was quickly subsumed by a cold, analytical resolve. This wasn't just about disrespect, it was about rewriting history, erasing their legacy. As Serena rattled through slides detailing growth projections and market penetration, Eleanor's gaze sharpened on the financial charts. Her eyes, honed by decades of scrutinizing balance sheets, immediately picked up on anomalies. There was a significant spike in consulting fees, an alarming increase in executive compensation, and a truly astronomical rise in marketing expenses. Much of the marketing budget, she noted, seemed to be directed towards Serena's former PR firm, a company known for its splashy campaigns rather than sustainable growth. These expenditures were not only exorbitant, but also antithetical to the core values she and Arthur had instilled. They had always prioritized reinvesting profits back into the company, into employee training, into robust research and development, into improving product quality. Serena's budget, on the other hand, seemed designed to funnel money outwards, enriching a select few while stripping the company's internal resources. This wasn't growth. It was asset stripping. Serena, completely unaware of the seasoned financial expert discreetly analyzing her every slide, radiated confidence. "Our aggressive restructuring," she announced, gesturing emphatically at a graph showing plummeting operational costs, "will allow us to shed outdated processes and redundant positions. We will be lean, agile, and fiercely competitive." Eleanor understood exactly what aggressive restructuring meant. It meant layoffs. It meant sacrificing the experienced, loyal employees who had dedicated their lives to Richardson Industries. Outdated processes meant abandoning the rigorous quality control and collaborative decision-making that had been the hallmark of their success. Redundant positions meant people like Brenda, like herself, people who embodied the company's history and culture. Serena was systematically dismantling the very soul of the company. Then, a phrase caught Eleanor's attention, freezing her in place. Serena, leaning forward, her voice dropping slightly, but still audible in the quiet room, spoke conspiratorially to Mr. Davies. "And with these efficiencies in place, we expect to be perfectly positioned for acquisition by a larger firm within, say, 18 months. A very attractive package for the right buyer." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Acquisition. 18 months. It wasn't about building, about growth, about legacy. It was about selling. Serena wasn't managing Richardson Industries. She was preparing it for liquidation. She was fattening it up for sale, maximizing her own short-term profit, utterly disregarding the decades of dedication, the livelihoods of hundreds of employees, and the proud name Arthur and Eleanor had built from scratch. The shock was profound, swiftly followed by a surge of righteous fury. Serena wasn't just disrespecting her, she was desecrating Arthur's memory, destroying their life's work. The quiet resolve Eleanor had felt earlier hardened into an unwavering determination. Serena had mistaken her for a ghost. But ghosts, Eleanor knew, could haunt, and this ghost was about to reclaim her rightful place. The oak-paneled office of Attorney Miller at Morrison & Associates exuded an aura of quiet authority. Miller, a man with shrewd eyes and a reassuring demeanor, listened patiently as Eleanor laid out her story. Presenting the letter from Arthur and the documents from VH Enterprises, he examined the paperwork thoroughly, his pen tapping lightly on his desk. "Mrs. Vance," he finally said, looking up, "the documentation is airtight. VH Enterprises is a legitimate holding company, and with these shares, combined with your existing interest, you do indeed hold a 40% controlling interest in Richardson Industries." Arthur was a meticulous man. Eleanor felt a wave of relief wash over her, quickly followed by a surge of renewed purpose. She then recounted Serena's actions, the humiliation, the radical changes to the company's structure, the exorbitant, wasteful spending, and the chilling revelation of her plan to sell Richardson Industries for a quick profit. Miller's expression hardened. "That sounds a lot like breach of fiduciary duty, Mrs. Vance. Possibly even embezzlement. To prepare a company for acquisition in such a short time frame, while simultaneously inflating costs for personal gain, is highly suspect. We'll need solid documentation to back up these claims, financial records, board meeting minutes, vendor contracts, anything you can get your hands on." Eleanor nodded, a plan already forming in her mind. Invisibility, she realized, could be her greatest asset. No one paid attention to the cleaning lady. No one would suspect the woman pushing a mop bucket of gathering corporate intelligence. The next day, she went to work, armed with a small, discreet digital camera, concealed in her uniform pocket. The executive floor was relatively quiet. Serena engrossed in a video conference. Eleanor, feigning a thorough dusting of the empty offices, found herself outside Serena's. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, a filing cabinet, usually locked, stood with its top drawer ajar. A folder inside, provocatively labeled "Strategic Planning Confidential," seemed to beckon her. With a quick glance around, Eleanor slipped into the office. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her movements were practiced and swift. She pulled out the folder. Inside, she found a trove of damning evidence. Correspondence with 3 different acquisition firms, outlining preliminary valuations and timelines, detailed financial projections, explicitly charting how streamlining before sale would inflate the company's apparent value, and, most damningly, a series of invoices and a consulting agreement with Pinnacle Strategic Solutions, Serena's former employer. Eleanor's camera clicked silently, capturing every page. The consulting fees with Pinnacle totaled nearly $200,000, purportedly for market analysis and efficiency optimization. Yet, Eleanor knew, Richardson Industries had an entire department dedicated to market analysis and an experienced operations team capable of internal efficiency reviews. The services were clearly duplicated, a blatant drain on company resources. Her eyes fell on the date of the consulting agreement. Her breath hitched. It was dated 3 weeks before Arthur's death, 3 weeks before his heart attack. Serena's insidious plan hadn't begun after Arthur was gone. It had begun while he was still alive, while he was still building their legacy. The betrayal was deeper, more calculated, than Eleanor could have ever imagined. A sudden click of the outer office door, followed by the faint sound of heels, sent a jolt of ice through Eleanor. Serena was back. Eleanor barely had time to slide the folder back into the cabinet and close the drawer before Serena appeared in the doorway of her office, her eyes narrowing as she took in Eleanor's presence. A chilling smile played on Serena's lips, a predatory gleam in her eyes. Well, Eleanor, fancy seeing you here. Lost something?" Serena's voice was laced with a dangerous calm. "Or are you just enjoying a little private tour? You know, I've been watching you." I had a feeling that whole grieving widow act was a little too convincing. Arthur, bless his sentimental old heart, always underestimated my intelligence. He probably thought he left his precious company completely unprotected, didn't he? Eleanor's grip tightened on the cleaning spray bottle she was holding. She met Serena's gaze, her own expression carefully neutral. I was just making sure everything was spotless for your important meeting, Serena. You always did demand the best. Serena laughed, a brittle, harsh sound. Oh, I demand a lot more than that, Eleanor. And I get it. Unlike some people. Don't think for a second that your little snooping will go unnoticed. Leo is in Singapore, you know. Any concerns you try to raise will be properly contextualized as grief-induced confusion. A sad, lonely old woman grasping at straws, Eleanor felt a cold rage bubbling inside her, but she kept her voice steady, almost meek. It's so different now, isn't it? Arthur always said a company grows from within, with its people. She subtly inserted a barb, watching for Serena's reaction. Serena bristled, her eyes flashing. Arthur was an old man, Eleanor, sentimental. He built a quaint little business. I'm turning it into something significant, something worth something. And I won't let anyone, especially not you, stand in my way. Serena's voice rose, a hint of desperation in her defiance. You're obsolete, Eleanor. Get used to it. Eleanor merely offered a small, knowing smile. We shall see. She calmly pushed her cart out of the office, leaving Serena fuming. That evening, from the privacy of her home, Eleanor made a discreet phone call to Pinnacle Strategic Solutions. Posing as a potential client, she inquired about their market analysis and efficiency optimization services. The representative was helpful but confused. They had no record of any such large-scale engagement with Richardson Industries in the last year. However, they did have a significant, ongoing account under the name Serena Richardson, an individual, not a corporate client, for personal brand development and executive image consultation. The truth was laid bare. Serena wasn't just wasting company money. She was directly embezzling from Richardson Industries, funneling substantial funds into her own personal branding, all while Arthur's legacy crumbled around her. Eleanor now had proof, irrefutable evidence of her daughter-in-law's treachery. If you're finding Eleanor's story as captivating as I am, please remember to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to stay tuned for the next dramatic twist. Your support means the world, and I promise, the best is yet to come. The unexpected sound of the front door opening and a familiar voice calling out brought a jolt to the otherwise quiet afternoon. Serena? Mom? I'm home. Leo. 3 days early from Singapore. Eleanor, who had been in the kitchen preparing a light lunch, paused, her hand hovering over a chopping board. A thrill of alarm, quickly masked, flickered across Serena's face as she emerged from the living room, a perfectly composed smile already in place. It was a brief, almost imperceptible tremor, but Eleanor, observing from the kitchen, didn't miss it. Serena, for once, was genuinely surprised, and it threw her off balance. Leo, darling, you're back. What a wonderful surprise. Serena rushed forward, embracing her husband, her voice a little too high, a little too effusive. The hidden panic was clear to Eleanor. Leo's early return meant less time for Serena to spin her web of deceit unchallenged. True to form, Serena wasted no time. Even as Leo was setting down his carry-on, she launched into her narrative. I've been so worried, Leo. About your mother. Her voice was laced with a feigned concern that grated on Eleanor's nerves. She's really struggling. More than I let on in our calls. I think the grief is finally taking a serious toll. Leo's brow furrowed, his gaze involuntarily darting towards the kitchen where Eleanor was standing, a silent observer. Struggling how? Serena. Serena lowered her voice conspiratorially, though Eleanor could still hear every word. She's become quite confused. Darling. Paranoid even. She's been going through my office files, asking Brenda in accounting all sorts of strange questions about company finances. And just yesterday, Mr. Davies from the Henderson Group noticed her listening in on private conversations. It was awkward, to say the least, so unprofessional. It's disruptive, Leo. And frankly, it's not safe for her to be wandering around like that. Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her. Serena was gaslighting Leo, carefully constructing a narrative of mental instability, painting Eleanor as a fragile, senile widow. The carefully orchestrated stories, the leveraging of Mr. Davies's observation to bolster her claims. It was all designed to systematically undermine Eleanor's credibility. I'm starting to think, Leo, Serena continued, her voice softening to a mournful whisper, that she needs more than just our care. Perhaps a wellness community? One specializing in grief-related issues for older adults. A place where she can get proper support, away from the stresses of the business. Eleanor's grip tightened on the countertop. A wellness community. A euphemism for a nursing home. A place where she would be safely out of the way, unable to interfere with Serena's plans. Leo visibly stiffened. A nursing home, Serena? No. I won't put my mother in a nursing home. The slight tremor of indignation in his voice gave Eleanor a flicker of hope. He still had some loyalty, some affection for his mother. Serena, however, was a master manipulator. She quickly adapted. Oh, not a nursing home, darling. Of course not. This is different. A specialized environment. More like a resort, really. With round-the-clock professional care and activities tailored for people experiencing profound loss. It's for her own good, Leo. For her peace of mind. And ours. Frankly, it's becoming impossible to run the company with her behavior. Eleanor remained in the kitchen, a ghost in her own home. Listening to her daughter-in-law systematically dismantle her sanity. Piece by calculated piece. Serena wanted her gone, completely isolated, unable to speak, unable to fight back. After a few minutes, Leo walked into the kitchen, his expression a mixture of concern and a strange, almost clinical observation. He looked at Eleanor, searching for signs of the instability Serena had described. Mom, he said, his voice hesitant. Serena told me about some difficulties at the office. Are you all right? You seem a little distracted. Eleanor met his gaze, her heart aching. This was her son, the boy she had raised, now questioning her sanity, influenced by his manipulative wife. She forced a small, weary smile. Oh, Leo, darling. It's good to see you. I'm fine. Just, the office has changed a lot since your father passed. A lot to take in. She chose her words carefully, planting a seed of doubt without directly contradicting Serena. Leo nodded, though his eyes still held that unsettlingly distant look. Yes. Well, change is inevitable, Mom. Serena and I are trying to take the company into the future. It's a competitive landscape out there. He paused, then continued, clearly parroting Serena's earlier lines. Maybe you need some distance from the day-to-day operations, some time to yourself, to heal. Distance? Eleanor echoed softly, her voice barely above a whisper. From the company your father and I built? Leo sighed, running a hand through his hair. Mom, I know you and Dad built something incredible. I respect that, truly. But it's my responsibility now to grow it, to ensure its survival. And sometimes that means making decisions you wouldn't have made. Difficult decisions. He avoided her gaze, his discomfort palpable. Eleanor watched him, her son, caught in Serena's web. He wasn't evil, not like Serena. But he was weak, easily swayed by ambition and his wife's persuasive lies. He saw her not as a co-founder, but as a sentimental relic, an impediment to his progress. The sadness she felt for Leo was profound, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce determination. Serena's attempt to institutionalize her was the final straw. It was clear that gentle persuasion, or subtle hints, would not work with Leo, nor deter Serena. Eleanor realized she had no choice. She had to fight fire with fire. And she had all the evidence she needed to burn Serena's carefully constructed world to the ground. Eleanor looked at her son, her heart aching but her resolve firm. The time for gentle hints was over. Leo, she began, her voice calm, devoid of the tremor she'd felt earlier. I understand you feel a responsibility to grow the company. Your father and I always did. But I have to ask, are all of these strategic decisions truly in the company's best interest, or are they serving someone else's? Leo's expression, which had been a mix of patronizing concern, visibly shifted. His eyes widened, and a flicker of alarm crossed his face. It was exactly the reaction Serena had predicted, confirming her warnings about Eleanor's paranoid thinking. He took a step back, a defensive posture. Mom, what are you talking about? Serena and I are doing everything we can to modernize. Modernize? Yes, Eleanor countered, her voice unwavering. But your father and I built Richardson Industries on core principles. Taking care of our people. Maintaining uncompromising quality standards, and always thinking about long-term sustainability rather than short-term profits. Those were the pillars. Leo nodded, a touch of his earlier condescension returning. And those values are still important, Mom, of course. But we have to adapt to changing market conditions. The world doesn't stand still. No, it doesn't. Eleanor agreed, her gaze piercing. But what kind of market conditions, Leo, require paying $200,000 in consulting fees to a company that doesn't actually provide any services? The question hung in the air, sharp and unexpected. Leo's face, which had been flushed with a slight irritation, turned a sickly pale. His eyes, fixed on his mother, now held a dawning horror. What are you talking about? He whispered. The confident facade crumbling. Pinnacle Strategic Solutions, Eleanor stated, watching his reaction intently. Serena's former employer. They build Richardson Industries for market analysis and efficiency optimization, but when I called them, they had no record of providing services to our company. Only to Serena Richardson, for personal brand development. She paused, letting the implications sink in. That's embezzlement, Leo. Clear as day. Leo reeled as if struck. You've been investigating the company finances? His voice was tight, a mixture of disbelief and accusations. I've been observing. Eleanor corrected him, her voice firm. Because when something you've helped build for 40 years, something you poured your life into, is being systematically torn down, you notice, you pay attention. She held his gaze. Your wife has been siphoning off company funds into her own pocket, disguised as consulting fees, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Eleanor pressed on, giving him no time to recover. Those efficiency improvements Serena's so proud of, firing long-time employees, cutting corners on quality control, inflating executive compensation. Those weren't about adapting, Leo. They were necessary adjustments for making the company look attractive to buyers. Leo's mouth fell open slightly. His eyes, wide with genuine shock, fixed on her. What buyers? He asked, his voice barely audible, a profound sense of betrayal now etched on his face. Eleanor allowed a grim smile to touch her lips. Ask your wife. Leo. At that very moment, a voice, falsely bright and dripping with concern, cut through the tension from the kitchen doorway. Everything all right in here? I thought I heard raised voices. Mom, darling, you look quite agitated. Are you feeling all right? Serena, perfectly coiffed, her smile radiant but her eyes cold and calculating, stepped into the living room, clearly having been listening. Eleanor turned to her daughter-in-law, her expression calm, collected, but radiating an unyielding strength. I am perfectly all right. Serena, in fact, I'm feeling clearer than I have in months. I am simply expressing my concern for the company that Arthur, Leo's father, and I built from the ground up. Serena's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Oh, Mom, you're just misunderstanding things again. All these big corporate terms can be so confusing, can't they? Leo and I are simply making smart business decisions. You're stressed from Arthur's passing. We understand. She took a step towards Leo, placing a comforting, possessive hand on his arm, attempting to re-establish her control. To frame Eleanor's words as the ramblings of a confused old woman. But Leo, his face still pale, his eyes fixed on Eleanor, shook off Serena's hand. He looked at his mother, a silent question in his eyes, a desperate plea for explanation. The seed of doubt Eleanor had planted had taken root, and Serena's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to unravel. "Show me, Mom," Leo said, his voice quiet, strained, but firm. His gaze shifted from Eleanor to Serena, a flicker of suspicion finally igniting. "Show me what you're talking about." The drive to Richardson Industries was shrouded in a heavy, suffocating silence. Leo, his jaw clenched, stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Eleanor sat beside him, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, maintaining a calm exterior. In the back seat, Serena, her usual polished composure visibly cracking, was furiously texting on her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Every now and then, she'd glance up at Leo in the rearview mirror, her eyes darting away quickly when he didn't meet her gaze. The game was up, and she knew it. They walked through the silent halls of the executive floor, the very same corridors Eleanor had recently scrubbed. This time, there was no pretense of her being a cleaning lady. Her head was held high, her steps purposeful, trailing behind her son and his increasingly agitated wife. Once inside Serena's spacious, modern office, Serena attempted one last desperate maneuver. "Leo, darling, before we look at anything, I just want to explain. These are merely possibilities. Every good CEO explores all avenues. Contingency plans, you know. It's part of due diligence." Her voice, though strained, still carried a flicker of its usual persuasive charm. Leo turned, his eyes cold and unwavering. "Stop explaining. Serena. Start showing." Serena's shoulders sagged. With a deep, shuddering breath, her hands trembling slightly, she moved to the filing cabinet Eleanor had identified. Her fingers fumbled with the drawer before she finally pulled it open, retrieving the Strategic Planning Confidential folder. She placed it on her large, glass-topped desk, almost reverently, as if the very papers held a power she could no longer control. Leo wasted no time. He snatched the folder and began to read, his eyes scanning the documents with an increasing intensity. Eleanor watched his face, observing the transformation. The initial skepticism gave way to confusion, then shock, and finally, a slow, dawning horror. He saw the acquisition inquiries from 3 major firms, the detailed valuation reports, the aggressive timeline for optimal liquidation. His voice was thick with disbelief as he read aloud one particular entry. Pinnacle. Strategic Solutions. $200,000 in consulting fees for market positioning analysis and acquisition readiness assessment. He looked up at Serena, his eyes blazing. $200,000? For this? Before Serena could even formulate a response, Leo pulled out his phone. He dialed, his finger jabbing at the screen. Eleanor watched, a silent observer, as he made the call she herself had made days prior. He identified himself, inquired about the services listed, and listened intently. His face grew even paler, his knuckles white as he gripped the phone. "You have no record of work for Richardson Industries?" he asked into the receiver, his voice tight. "But you do have an ongoing account under Serena Richardson?" He disconnected the call, his hand dropping slowly to his side. Serena's carefully constructed composure shattered completely. The radiant smile vanished, replaced by a mask of desperate fear and defensive fury. "Serena," Leo began, his voice low, trembling with barely suppressed rage. "Are you telling me that you've been stealing from my family's company? That you've been planning to sell it, the company my father and mother built from nothing, without even telling me?" The accusation hung heavy in the air, undeniable. "No, of course not," Serena protested, her voice rising in pitch, a frantic edge to it. It's strategic planning, Leo, not stealing. And I never would have sold it without your approval. I was going to bring it to the board, to you. Once the deal was ready, Eleanor, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "She intended to gain your approval," she interjected, her voice clear and cutting. "After she had restructured everything. Leo, after she had fired all the long-term employees, cut corners on quality, and siphoned off enough money to make the company look like a desperate, failing entity, making the sale look like the only viable option. She intended to present you with a fait accompli. A company so decimated that you'd be forced to agree. Serena whirled on Eleanor, her face contorted with pure hatred. You meddling old hag. This is all your fault. Your outdated thinking, your sentimental attachment to Arthur's quaint little family company. You have no idea what it takes to run a modern business, to make it something significant, Serena, Eleanor calmly repeated, meeting Serena's furious gaze without flinching. Or something profitable, for you, at the expense of everyone else? Leo stared at the two women, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place with sickening clarity. The aggressive restructuring, the cold dismissals, his mother's confusion. It all made sense now. A grotesque mosaic of betrayal and greed. He looked at Serena, then back at his mother. The depth of his wife's deception finally sinking in. The air in Serena's office crackled with a volatile energy. Leo's face was a mask of furious disbelief, his eyes fixed on Serena. Quaint little family company? He snarled, his voice rising, raw with outrage. That quaint little family company employed 300 people. It generated millions in revenue. It was Dad's life, and Mom's life too. It was a legacy of integrity and hard work. Serena, however, was past reason. Cornered, she lashed out, her words dripping with contempt. Please, Leo, don't be so naive. Your mother was dead weight, always had been. Arthur was just too sentimental to push her aside. She belongs in a nursing home, not in a boardroom, clinging to some outdated notion of family values. The profound insult to Eleanor, to Arthur, to their entire life's work, landed with a sickening thud. Leo flinched as if physically struck, his initial anger twisting into a look of utter disgust. The woman standing before him, his wife, was a stranger, stripped bare of all pretense. Get out, Leo said, his voice low, shaking with suppressed fury. Get out of this office. Get out of this building. Get out of my family's company. Serena's defiance crumbled. Her face cycled through shock, disbelief, then a frantic desperation. Leo, no. Please, darling, you can't be serious. This is all a misunderstanding. She's just confused. We can fix this. Don't let her turn you against me. She reached for him, but Leo recoiled. Fix this? Leo scoffed, his gaze hardening. The embezzlement? The 3 years of lies and manipulation? The plan to cash out on everything my parents built and move on? No, Serena. There's nothing to fix here. Only consequences. Panic flared in Serena's eyes. She knew Leo well enough to recognize the finality in his tone. If she couldn't appeal to his affection, she would appeal to his fear. Fine, she spat, her voice laced with venom. You want to fight, Leo? You'll get one. Divorce. I'll take half of everything we built together. The house, your shares in this company. Everything. Leo let out a bitter laugh. Half of what we built? You built nothing, Serena. You just tried to dismantle a successful company for parts. And for your own gain. Serena's eyes narrowed, a cold, calculating glint replacing the desperation. Arthur's legacy, she sneered, looking directly at Eleanor, was mediocrity. Small thinking. This company was ripe for a real visionary, someone who wasn't afraid to get rid of the dead wood. Then, her voice dropped, becoming chillingly calm. But if you want to play dirty, Leo, I can do that too. I know things about this company, about your family, about you that could be very damaging if they became public. Think about a costly, public divorce, the kind that shreds reputations and leaves nothing but scandal. Her eyes flickered to Eleanor. Push me too far, Eleanor. And you might find out that your precious Arthur wasn't quite the saint you remember. The implicit threat hung heavy in the air, a dark cloud settling over them. Serena's parting shot was designed to strike at their deepest vulnerabilities, to sow discord and fear. With a final, triumphant smirk, she snatched her purse from the desk and swept out of the office, leaving behind an unnerving silence. Leo slumped into a chair, his head in his hands, utterly devastated. He looked up at Eleanor, his eyes filled with a profound remorse. Mom, he choked out, his voice thick with guilt. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it. I should have listened to you. I let her turn me against you, against Dad's memory. I was so blind. Eleanor knelt beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. It's all right, Leo. She's a master manipulator. She fools everyone she meets. She pulled out her phone and showed him a screenshot of Serena's first frantic text message after she had revealed the embezzlement. It simply read, "You have no idea what you've done." Leo stared at the message, a grim determination replacing the raw emotion in his eyes. He looked up at his mother, a flicker of his old strength returning. "No," he said, his voice firm. "I think we know exactly what we've done. We've finally uncovered the truth." Eleanor moved back into her old home, the familiar comfort a balm to her weary soul. Her phone, however, offered no such peace. Over the next few days, Serena barraged her with a torrent of text messages. 26 inches total. Each more desperate and venomous than the last. They ranged from threats to pleas, accusations to promises, culminating in a single, ominous message. "Check your email." The email, when Eleanor finally opened it, was from Serena's attorney. It was a vicious attack, designed to intimidate and dismantle. Almost immediately, Attorney Miller contacted Eleanor, his voice grave. "Mrs. Vance, Serena's legal team is making some interesting, and frankly, disturbing claims about Arthur's business practices." He rattled off a list: tax avoidance, undocumented cash transactions, possible bribery involving political donations. Eleanor sighed, a familiar weariness settling over her. She knew Arthur wasn't perfect, but his intentions had always been good. Arthur did give cash Christmas bonuses to long-term employees, she admitted, to avoid the paperwork and some of the taxes for them, never for personal gain. And he made political donations to support civic leaders he believed in, leaders who would benefit our community. Serena's attorneys would twist that into improper influence, wouldn't they? Miller confirmed her fears. Precisely. They're also claiming your hidden shares, the VH Enterprises shares, are fraudulent asset concealment to circumvent estate taxes. They're threatening criminal charges against you for that, Mrs. Vance. Eleanor felt a cold dread. Serena wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting to destroy them. The attorney's demands were clear. Serena wanted 50% of Leo's shares in Richardson Industries, the house, a substantial alimony payment, and for them to drop all criminal complaints against her, all in exchange for her silence regarding Arthur's transgressions and the fraudulent VH Enterprises. Just as Eleanor hung up with Miller, Leo walked in, his face etched with exhaustion and anger. "Serena's attorney made the same offer to me," he said, slumping onto the sofa. "Threats about Dad, about you, about me. She wants to bleed us dry and walk away unscathed." But Leo had not been idle. "I spent the last few days going through everything in Serena's home office," he revealed, pulling out a thick file of documents, hidden in a false bottom in her desk. "It's worse than we thought, Mom." He laid out contracts with acquisition firms that predated his marriage to Serena, revealing a long-term, calculated plan. There were financial projections showing systematic looting of the company's assets, disguised as legitimate expenses. Most chillingly, he found email correspondence with a private investigator, detailing surveillance of their family for 4 years, a calculated effort to gather dirt and vulnerabilities. He found evidence that Serena had siphoned nearly $800,000 from the company through fake contracts, inflated expenses, and outright theft, funneling it into offshore accounts. "She wasn't just planning to sell the company," Leo said, his voice hollow. "She was planning to destroy us too, to make sure we had nothing left to fight her with." Overwhelmed, Leo looked at Eleanor, his face a mixture of despair and fierce determination. "I can't, Mom. I can't give her anything. She planned this for years. She married me for this. She tried to send you to a nursing home, to discredit us, to destroy everything Dad and you worked for. Let her expose whatever she thinks she has. We fight. We embrace justice, no matter the public scandal." Eleanor nodded, a quiet strength radiating from her. "That's the Arthur I know, Leo. The fight for what's right." The very next morning, Attorney Miller, armed with Leo's new evidence, filed criminal charges against Serena for embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The battle had begun. Leo, with a renewed sense of purpose, pulled out his phone and sent a final defiant text back to Serena. "We'll take our chances." 6 months later, Richardson Industries thrived. Under the joint leadership of Eleanor and Leo, the company celebrated its most profitable quarter in 5 years. The destructive changes Serena had implemented were systematically reversed. Long-term employees, those who hadn't been fired, were reassured, and many who had been unjustly let go were rehired. Quality standards were restored, and customer trust, once eroded, was painstakingly rebuilt. Serena Richardson, stripped of her ill-gotten gains and her manipulative power, was serving an 18-month sentence in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. The legal battles had been brutal. As Serena's attorneys fought tooth and nail, Arthur's minor infractions, while exposed, were proven to be those of a good man trying to take care of his people and his community, ultimately deemed administrative oversights rather than criminal intent. Serena's crimes, however, were systematic, calculated, and devastating, leaving no room for doubt or leniency. Eleanor Vance, no longer the invisible cleaning lady, stood at the head of the newly refurbished boardroom table. A freshly polished portrait of Arthur, a quiet smile on his face, hung on the wall. She raised a glass, her gaze meeting her husband's painted eyes. Her voice, clear and strong, resonated through the room. "To Arthur," she said, "and to justice." Her face, lined with the wisdom of experience, glowed with earned power, a testament to resilience, integrity, and a legacy finally restored.